Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast for our DFS episode of Week 6. I'm Bobby Sylvester, joined as always by Mike Tagliere, and we're on Twitter at Mike Tagliere NFL and at Bobby Fantasy Pro. Tags, how's it going, man?
It's going good, man. It's an early morning show. I always like these ones. We get up, our brains are fresh. We're not fried out from looking at numbers all day. Everything's good.
And my day is going really good already because I had cookie dough for breakfast. I've been getting in the habit of just making cookie dough instead of going to the store and spending $8 on some dessert. Oh, cookie dough's so good, dude.
No, Bobby, stop. You are not 12. Even though you look it.
Everybody loves cookie dough. Are you kidding? You're going to get so much hate on Twitter for this.
That's so much sugar, dude. Seriously, I mean, I'm to the point.
Who cares?
I don't know if it's just my old age speaking right now, but I've gotten to the point where like candy just doesn't do it for me. Every now and then, I'll have some Reese's or something like that, but it's just too sweet.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, our guest today is Joe Holka of FantasyLabs and Action Network HQ. Joe is excellent on DFS, so he's perfect to have on the show. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe Holka. Joe, how's it going?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Doing it a little bit earlier, so I appreciate that. Thursdays are kind of nuts for a lot of us, right? So it's great to kind of get started this early in the day. And then, like you said, we're fresh. We haven't been on our screens for a couple hours, which this time of the year is nice.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Bobby, I should let you know that. So Joe's girlfriend, I feel the need to bring this up because it's out of this world. But Bobby, you're going to love it. She puts butter on her Pop-Tarts. I'm not kidding.
That's my kind of person.
It's so weird.
Joe, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a butter on pizza guy.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of people think that, I have problems and everything, but butter on Pop-Tarts, that's a whole nother level. I respect it.
Yeah, the first time I ever saw her do that, I thought she was kidding. I had no idea what was going on. She's got some kind of weird eating habits. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, the butter on Pop-Tarts thing came up on Mike and I's podcast a couple years ago, and it just kind of stuck from there.
So how does she do it? Is it put it in the toaster and then you flip it around on the non-frosting side and you butter that part?
So she only butters the frosting side of it. So I'm not really sure what the kind of optimal play is there. She always makes me try a bite of it. And each time I'm just basically I know exactly what this is going to be. It's going to be a Pop-Tart with butter on it. It just doesn't sound appetizing to me. So.
Yeah, it does sound appetizing to me. I don't really eat Pop-Tarts, but I'm going to have to try this one out. Where do you stand on the cookie dough debate?
Oh, I'm with you there. I'm definitely on your side of that.
There you go. I don't know what Tag's problem is. He's always saying old people stuff on the show.
Yeah, I'm always old people stuff.
Yeah, Mike, we haven't done a pod together in 2 years, and now you're already coming at us with too much sugar. What is going on? What have you been doing?
I don't know what happened to me. Another kid is what happened to me. I got older really fast.
Dude, I've got 3 kids. That's no excuse.
Shenanigans.
All right, guys. Well, we don't have much in the way of injury news to talk about. I'm just going to mention a few things here. Eric Ebron didn't practice on Wednesday. Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks did go through the walkthrough. It seems like they're probably going to play. Devontae Freeman has another injury going on. Dalvin Cook still limited in practice. Devontae Freeman's probably not going to play. We'll get to all that. Before we move on over to the meat of the show, I want to talk about one of the sponsors of today's show, PristineAuction.com. First of all, we're giving away a signed Davante Adams Packers helmet, and this thing is beautiful. You can go to fantasypros.com/contest to sign up for that. It takes about 30 seconds to do. But PristineAuction.com, they auction off over 100 items every single night. You're going to find some incredible values in here. Everything is guaranteed authentic from only the most trusted sources. And listen to some of these values I saw just yesterday. A Corey Davis signed Titans jersey, $45. A Keenan Allen signed Chargers jersey, $63. Mark Ingram signed Alabama helmet, just $55. Guys, there are values like this every single day on PristineAuction.com. Make sure to check out what they have for your cave. And when you buy something from them, make sure to let them know Fantasy Pro sent you. That way we can keep doing these contests. Again, that's PristineAuction.com, PRISTINE. Let's just dive right into the DFS stuff because we always run a little bit late with this podcast, so I want to get as much information in as possible. Joe, the way we do these shows is we start with cash games, obviously for DraftKings and FanDuel, and then we're just going to go position by position, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, so forth, and then we'll flip it around and we'll go backward with GPP plays. At the end, we'll give our lock of the week. So here we go. Let's start at the quarterback position. Is there one play that really stands out to you this week, or are there just a couple of them that are solid cash game plays?
Yeah, Jameis Winston at 5,800 is the one that really stands out to me. This game's going to be so popular. I honestly don't even know if I love Winston from like a raw points perspective, but like when you're trying to pay down a quarterback, which I'm typically trying to do, there's a couple guys in that range that certainly makes sense. But I think Winston, I mean, as a road dog, it's not an ideal situation. The spread is tight. So hopefully if this game shoots out, Tampa Bay is the third highest in neutral pace. More or less interested in Winston because I like a lot of his weapons in this game. So I think that's kind of the main draw. It's more of a price and hopefully a correlation type thing for me. But I assume that Mike is going to disagree with this one.
No.
I am big time on the Winston bandwagon. So is Mike. We're all over it this week.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not going to disagree with you on this one. Atlanta is a mess, man. I don't even know if they're going to have Grady Jarrett again this week. They've been down Keanu Neal, Deion Jones, Ricardo Allen. Like, their defense just doesn't know what to do. They've moved Brian Poole, their nickel cornerback. They moved him to safety now to try and work things. They pushed Isaiah Oliver, their rookie cornerback, into Desmond Trufant's slot, put Trufant in the slot. Like, literally, they're trying everything they can to stop opposing offenses. It's not working. They've allowed at least 37 points to each of their last 3 opponents. And the reason you have to like Winston, it's going back to like Drew Brees at the beginning of the year, right? It's the same thing with Matt Ryan. So we could talk about Ryan since it's the same game here. I'm having difficulty figuring out which one of these two I want to play. Like Winston is obviously $1,000 cheaper, so that's allowing me to do some things with my other positions. Both of these teams are lacking a run game right now. Like Devonta Freeman, if you guys missed the news, he is dealing with some sort of bone bruise on his knee, and he's had a setback. I doubt he plays this week, which means that Tevin Coleman's going to get the start. He's been struggling on the ground.
He's banged up too, isn't he?
Well, that's the thing. He was a little dinged up, but he did play last week. So, I mean, it was like a timeshare between him, Freeman, and Ito Smith. But basically, the Bucs have done well against run games. They have not allowed more than 81 yards to any one team of running backs. Not one running back, like any team of running backs. But they're allowing a lot through the air. So I believe that's where Tevin Coleman and Ito Smith shine the most. Jameis Winston, obviously, their run game hasn't gotten going. So I just feel like this game is going to have so many plays in it. I feel like the defenses are just primed. Like they're funnel defenses where you could just throw all day on them. I'm just having difficulty figuring out which one of these two I want to play. If you want to pay up, I have no issue with you going with Matt Ryan here. I think it's a great spot for him at home. It's a dome. You don't have to worry about weather affecting the game. Jameis Winston's a phenomenal play as well. I have them as my 1 and 2 options. I just can't figure out which one I want to do. And once I get further into roster construction, that's when I'll decide.
It's exactly the same for me. Right now, I've got Jameis Winston plugged into my cash game lineups, but I'm a little bit nervous because he's not always the safest play. Joe, does this concern you at all that he's more of a hit or miss type of guy?
Yeah, like your day could go wrong pretty quickly here, right?
Yeah, I don't think it would happen with Matt Ryan, but I don't want to spend that kind of money.
Yeah, so Matt Ryan, it's definitely going to be a roster construction thing. It kind of depend. I mean, it is only Thursday. Maybe we'll have something open up in terms of value. I love the Matt Ryan call as well, just for all the reasons that you stated. The pass attempts in this game are going to be great. One thing that I think goes understated with talking about pace, it's not even just about the amount of kind of how fast these plays are running. Like the more pass attempts, the more incompletions as well, right? So that just is more plays that we have to look forward to in this game against two defenses, like you talked about, just haven't been very good, especially on the Atlanta side. But Jameis in particular, is there a better than 0% chance that we see Fitz in this game if he really struggles? Like I know it's not something I should be worried about, but it's something that like is in the back of my mind here and there when I'm trying to look at a guy for cash games. But 5,800, it certainly makes sense.
I can't imagine Josh Allen would have more than like a 5% chance of Fitz against Atlanta's defense, but it just, it concerns me because Winston was okay in the game against Chicago, and it was Chicago, but he had 2 interceptions in one half.
One was a tip ball, though. So it really wasn't outside of those 2 interceptions. I think he had 1 incompleted pass.
He was 16 for 20, yeah.
Yeah, so he didn't play terrible against the Bears, and to be honest, like no quarterback has done anything against the Bears. Like his wide receivers didn't show up that game either. So I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't think that they ever go back to Fitzpatrick unless like legitimately they're done with Winston, and I don't think it happens in one half of football or anything like that. And the reason I say that is because if they go back to Winston, there's no putting that back in the box. You know what I mean? Like they already had to go through this once. They had the bye week to set it up. My biggest question about this offense this week is whether or not Ronald Jones is in fact installed as a starter. I want to hear that come out of Dirk Cutter's mouth. I want to see Peyton Barber potentially inactive. I would also like to see if Chris Godwin has been installed more because he's been 4th in wide receiver snaps the last few weeks for them, and that's just unacceptable.
Yeah. So I'm looking at it. All 3 of us have Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston as our top 2 quarterbacks. Our ownership projections have 2 other guys above 10%, and then Andy Dalton right below 10%. Deshaun Watson and Cam Newton, because of their running floor, Do you think either of these guys are good plays to consider in cash games, or is it just Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston, Joe?
Yeah, I'm sure at least the injury situation is something I'm monitoring with Deshaun Watson. At 6,400, I think I prefer just to get up to Ryan in that spot. But the rushing equity is huge, and anytime you're playing against this Buffalo team, I think it makes a decent amount of sense. In cash games, I'm really dialed in on that game in particular. But Cam Newton, I'm a little bit more interested in that, but he is on the road. So a lot of these guys that kind of come out popping as like strong values, a lot of them are on the road. We've got Russell Wilson at 5,700 on the road. We've got Cam Newton at 6,100 on the road. These are at least DraftKings prices that I'm kind of looking at. I don't know if there's a ton of kind of to like in that range. I think if I'm kind of going to pay up, it's going to be for Ryan. If I'm going to pay down, it's going to be for Winston, at least in cash games.
And Washington's actually been a lot better against the pass this year, so I'm avoiding that one. Watson with the chest injury, the over-under on that game is only 41. So for me, it's just Ryan and Winston. Tags, are you the same?
Yeah, pretty much. And by the way, Washington, I think that was kind of like it's somewhat of a fluke saying that they've gotten better. And they were better against the pass up until Drew Brees completely tore them apart. And I know it's Drew Brees and all, but their defense just looks stupid.
They didn't even try, man. I don't know what they were doing.
Their secondary looked terrible. Some people thought that play was like fixed. I'm not going to say it was, but it was pretty crazy to see that. But I mean, Cam is fine, but there's no reason. That's the thing, is like there's just two, like the options up top are way too good. I wouldn't consider anybody else.
All right, guys, let's move on over to running back then. Is this just a Todd Gurley and figure the rest out week, Joe?
Yeah, that's typically what I like to do in roster construction. But I'm going to probably start with Christian McCaffrey, honestly. I think that the savings you get with him for that role is just insane. It's more of not really even a matchup type thing. It's more of a usage thing for McCaffrey. I was on him last week. It was okay, but just his floor in general is so high with how involved he is in the passing game. There's only so many situations we have, right, where we have these guys that are so active in the passing game. It just sets up so well for DraftKings. So 8,300 seems like a really good price for McCaffrey again this week.
Past 3 weeks, he's got 22 touches, 30 touches, 22 touches. Yeah, I don't see him scoring fewer than, 18, 19 PPR points this week.
Well, are you guys worried though? Like, so a lot of the touches recently have been on the ground, and obviously that's not where Christian McCaffrey is going to score his fantasy points. My concern here is that all of a sudden the Panthers are playing a rotation of Devin Funchess, Torrey Smith, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Jarius Wright. All these guys are getting meaningful snaps.
And I like them all, too. It's not like none of them deserve snaps.
Right, and they all play different roles. Like, they can take handoffs. Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore have done that multiple times. Like, they're being used in the screen game. You have Greg Olsen coming back this week. It's like, all of a sudden, are we looking at a place where Christian McCaffrey is turning more into a traditional running back than kind of like that scat back that they were using, like, to target over 10 times per game? Are we worried about him losing targets? Because if he loses targets, that legitimately kills his value for me, because I don't care what he does on the ground, because he's not going to score touchdowns.
And our consensus projection, like you were saying, has him at 0.3 touchdowns this week.
I actually like what I've seen from him on the ground. I think it's kind of a plus for his value, because it's not something that he's been extremely efficient with until this season. And this is just a really strong matchup as far as adjusted line yards. It's one of those metrics I'm looking at Football Outsiders. Both sides of the ball, the offensive line for Carolina is the best in the entire league in adjusted line yards. The last time I looked, I think that might have slightly changed after the numbers came out yesterday. But the Bengals 27th in adjusted line yards. So it's a massive disadvantage, at least in the run game, kind of at the line of scrimmage. And one thing that I do like about McCaffrey's usage in the passing game is Cam's not afraid to throw to him close to the goal line as well. So it's not just that we have that rushing equity on the goal line. We also have the chance that he's just going to throw him kind of a quick pass in the red zone as well. So like that kind of usage is not something that always shows up on the stat sheet, but if you watch the games, just the way they want to get this guy the ball it sets up so well for fantasy.
I mentioned McCaffrey every single week as a quality play, and Tags always tries to shut me down, but I've played him in 3 weeks in cash games, and he has never let me down. Now, my guy's actually not Todd Gurley. Tags, is your guy Todd Gurley that you have to play?
No, I mean, I think I'd rather play Melvin Gordon and take the savings.
Okay. Melvin Gordon's going up against Cleveland, whose run defense has not been as good this year. Their pass defense has been incredible, but I like Gordon as well. He's 8,200 On DraftKings, Todd Gurley's 10,000.
Yeah, that's the thing. Gurley's so expensive, it literally like handcuffs you. Like you have to go down to like someone like Eckler at 4,200. You might have to go down to like at wide receiver. You're going to have multiple guys that are in the $4,000 range, which is it's less than ideal for cash. I mean, you could find some decent plays there that we'll talk about, but it's just tough for me. Like Denver has looked terrible. So it's like the last 2 weeks, like between Isaiah Crowell, Kareem Hunt, and Bilal Powell, they've allowed like over 400 yards and a couple touchdowns to those guys. So it's like, Denver, that's the one thing they've always had to fall back on is their run defense. And I don't know if it's just like it's gone bad the last 2 weeks or if it's just been like an admiration where it's like we should look at this like on a small sample size and say it was just a bad week or two. It's tough for me to say, but I'm more worried about the Rams offense if Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp don't play because I just don't know what it does to the offense in terms of how smoothly it will run.
It's interesting. I mean, I think they're going to play, but I'm with you on Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon's the guy that I'm going with for sure. I also want to play Ezekiel Elliott, and I hope I'm not trying to get cute. Like, I don't think I'm doing this, but I'm looking at his price. 7,000, right? And yeah, he's going up against Jacksonville, so it's obviously not the best matchup, but every single week this season, he's got 16-plus points. I think his floor is 2x, guys.
Joe, what do you think about Elliott here? I mean, I think he's more of a tournament play, but I know some people are considering him in cash.
Yeah, I'm not really on Zeke. I don't normally play these running backs with like a really low total against Jacksonville, who's done really well against running backs in the passing game. One thing that I don't really necessarily like about Zeke's usage, it's probably why I missed out on that big week that he had a couple weeks ago, is he's not really being used in the passing game like a lot of these other running backs we talk about, McCaffrey, Kamara. Like those guys are running legitimate routes. And Zeke, until at least recently, was just being used on these dump-off passes, which is fine, but it's not like they're necessarily scheming to get him the ball in the passing game. At 7K, I think it makes sense. I'm just not necessarily trying to attack this Jacksonville defense. But Tags, I mean, Todd Gurley at 10K, the way that you framed that, like, it makes me want to play him even more. Because if people just look at that price tag and don't want to play him, like, yeah, we're going to get your 25 touches or so from him per usual. He's going to be active in the passing game. Really big total, decent size favorite. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on it because I actually think that playing in Denver matters, not just for the defense. We won't get into the does defense matter debate on here, but
no.
But from the defense's perspective of just the elevation there, I think it's something that people don't talk about enough. Like as an athlete going into that elevation in Denver is so difficult. So if this guy is going to be extremely involved as far as touches, if some of those other guys are out, I'm not really trying to attack a guy at 10K that is going to have to deal with elevation. So it's something that I definitely consider if I'm going to be spending that much salary.
I want to go back to Zeke really quick because he does have 22 receptions on the season. That's more than Deion Lewis.
Oh, he's on pace for like 90 targets.
Todd Gurley, David Johnson. He's getting work in the passing game. I think he's game script proof at this point. And it's not really that I'm attacking it's not at all that I'm attacking the Jacksonville defense. I'm attacking the price at 7,000 for Zeke. We're not going to see that again.
Yeah, that's the thing that you have about it, but it's like you have to consider like with the way that scoring is up this year, it's almost like I had a follower on Twitter mention it to me. He's like, we always looked at that 2.5x times model where it's like you look at 2.5x and that used to be enough to cash the majority of the time. This year, it's been like 3. You've essentially been looking at 3x in order to cash. And like, so looking at Zeke, you're saying that he needs to score, somewhere in the 20-point range. And it's not to say it's not possible, but when you're spending up that much, you need a sure thing. And you ideally, when you're spending up that much, you want someone who can actually shatter that projection. So, I mean, Todd Gurley, we're talking about him, 25 to 30 PPR points. I do think it's possible. It's just tough getting a bunch of other guys in your lineup who you can guarantee for that 3x production.
Yeah, you're definitely right. You know what I want to mention? I'm definitely not playing Zeke on FanDuel. He's 8,100. Melvin Gordon's 88. McCaffrey's 84. Gurley's only 95. But on DraftKings, I think Elliott's a fine price. But there's so many great value plays on DraftKings every week at the running back position because the prices can get so low. I mean, Chris Carson at 4,400. Austin Eckler in full PPR, 4,200. Phillip Lindsay, 4,500. Carlos Hyde, 4,900. He's got 100 carries on the season already. Tags, are you playing any of these guys?
I think Lynch is a great play this week against Seattle. I think him against his old team. I have Lynch as like a top 15 running back this week. I like him a lot. Joe, how do you feel about him? I know this game's in London, so, we talk about a lot of variables, and this is one of those things where it's like very variable. There's so many things involved here, but Seattle's defense missing so many players. They haven't done extremely well against the run this year. Losing Earl Thomas has forced them to drop some players back in coverage. I just feel like Marshawn Lynch is a guy that runs highly on emotions, and he's like one of those guys that would walk into a game being like, I'm going to stick it to this team. And on top of that, he's coming off a game where he's just very upset with the Raiders coaching staff for like not giving him the ball on the goal line. I think this is a week where they try and make it right. They take the ball to Derek Carr's hands because he turns the ball over, and I think Marshawn Lynch scores 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't really like what I saw from Oakland last week. I think in this range, I'm kind of locked into Carlos Hyde, which we can talk about. But I get it with Lynch. I mean, he's going to see the bulk of the carries. But my worry is that if and when Oakland falls behind, that it could turn into a Jalen Richard game. And I actually think Jalen Richard's a pretty talented guy. I'm always kind of worried about that. Like, you need touchdowns with Lynch. And I guess I did just mention Carlos Hyde, who's a little bit touchdown dependent as well. But at the same time, like, only 3 running backs in the entire NFL have more carries in the red zone than Lynch. And Seattle has allowed 4 rushing touchdowns to running back, 6 worst in the league. So I totally get the Lynch play. I just don't know if I'll make it there myself just because of this situation in Oakland. I'm not extremely excited about.
Are we moving to Tevin Coleman in cash? Because Devonta Freeman's not going to play. It seems like almost like likely. And Tevin Coleman at 5,400. The Bucs haven't allowed much on the ground, but through the air they have allowed a ton. Do we like Tevin Coleman at 5,400?
On DraftKings, I like that. FanDuel is 6,300. I'm not interested. I'd rather play TJ Yeldon.
Yeah, Yeldon's 6,400 on DraftKings, so it's 1,000 more. Who would you rather play, Joe? Would you rather play TJ Yeldon or Tevin Coleman in cash?
Yeah, I think it's Tevin Coleman for me. I think he's going to operate as the lead back in this offense, right? His kind of style matches up really well against this defense. They're most effective when running off tackle, right? So I think that's kind of Coleman's game. I think that there's some other guys in this mid, like, it's a weird week at running back, right? There's like a lot of these guys in the mid range that make a decent amount of sense. You can even consider David Johnson. This price range is crazy that we're talking about him in this price range still. I don't love his usage either. So I mean, Coleman in a much better game. I think his touchdown upside, or at least his touchdown expectation, is probably a little bit higher than DJ. But those are kind of some guys I'm looking at in this range. I'm not going down a little bit further.
One other play that stands out to me, and I obviously wouldn't play him on DraftKings at his price, but in FanDuel, Jordan Howard is super cheap. He's $6,200, the 23rd ranked running back in terms of price. Chicago is a favorite. It's at Miami, and Miami's defense has been better, but their schedule has been super easy. I think Howard's a solid play this week. I don't have him in my lineups right now, but he's someone I definitely want to mention as for consideration.
Well, I mean, in FanDuel, that price of 6,200, I did see that. He's down the list. Like, I'd play him there everywhere. Like, I'd have him in tournaments. I'd have him in cash.
I mean, yeah, he's cheaper than Chris Carson.
And on DraftKings, it's not like as bad as it used to be with him. Like, because it used to be like to the point where, like, okay, well, if he doesn't score touchdowns, then he's going to be worthless because he doesn't catch passes. But I mean, this year he's been targeted a bit more. I mean, it's 12 targets on the season. He's caught 10 passes. I mean, that's 2.5 passes per game. He hasn't looked bad doing it, so I don't want to say that. Matt Nagy came out and said it was game script dependent last week, like their game plan that they came up with, that Tariq Cohen was on the field more than him, that there's nothing wrong with Jordan Howard. He's going to be used more. And I actually believe that. You have an elite defense. You have a team that's favored going against an inexperienced Miami front seven. I have no idea. They might be down Cameron Wake again, too. Like, if they're down Cameron Wake, it's going to affect their pass rush, and there's going to be issues there. If the Bears win this game, I think they do it through Jordan Howard.
I'm a little bit worried that his price has gotten to the point where I'm just more comfortable with some of these other guys. I don't really love this game in general, so I'm a little bit worried about that. I don't know. I have some biases towards Howard, so I'll kind of defer to you guys on that. I know he's been a little bit better in the passing game this year, and it has more to do with how his coaches want to use him than what I think about him. But yeah, I mean, he's probably going to see 20 touches, but at 6,500, we talk about how you do need to kind of shoot for ceiling this year just because scoring's up so much. I just don't think Howard's the guy that's really going to kind of vault you up the leaderboard in kind of comparison to some of these other guys that are slightly more expensive. That's
happened in baseball too, where you have to start going for all these guys that hit home runs because you can't win cash games the old way.
Yeah, that's why Tevin Coleman. I think Tevin Coleman's probably my cash game play, even away from Lynch. Like, because talking about guys like Lynch and Howard on DraftKings, I don't like them as much, but I think they're good plays. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, home favorites, 57.5 over under. Coleman's a great play.
But yeah, Coleman at 5,400 is the one striking me. I'm probably gonna play him over Yeldon. It's close, though, like between those two, because Sean Lee's going to be out again. Dallas is not very good against the run when he's out of the lineup, and that's regardless of what Alfred Blue did last week with his 46 yards on 20 carries. Even he though, like he still finishes, I think, a top 15 running back because of all the work he did in the passing game. So Yeldon should at least get that.
Is there anyone else you guys would even consider? Maybe a Chris Carson, James Conner at Cincinnati?
Mike, I want to hear what you think about Carlos Hyde. That's the one that I actually have on my main team right now at 4,900. He opens up a ton. This Chargers defense hasn't been good. Carlos Hyde has 16 to 23 carries in every game this year. He's just been dominating all the kind of the goal line touches. Like, he's definitely someone that I'm a little bit worried about. I mean, he is pretty touchdown dependent, right? But only Todd Gurley has seen more goal line looks than him inside the 5-yard line this year. He's got 9 of them. So I'm kind of interested in Hyde at 4,900. Talk me off the ledge.
Well, the thing is, so Corey Legit came back to the Chargers defense last week, and if you look at the Chargers, like if you look at the grand scheme of things, what they have allowed some fantasy points, but if you look at it, outside of Todd Gurley, who kills everyone, the Chargers have yet to allow running back more than 49 yards on the ground. So that's like an issue for Carlos Hyde because he hasn't been involved in the passing game as much with Baker Mayfield there. Mayfield did check down to Duke Johnson in week 4. Last week, he didn't really so much. The LA secondary, like basically they're not getting a pass rush. So Mayfield, I don't think is going to feel the need to check it down very much. So therefore, Hyde is going to become extremely touchdown dependent. For his price right now, I just feel like, there's other guys in his price range that I think that I'd feel better scoring a touchdown than him. The Chargers, it's almost like going back to the Saints, right? Where it's like we saw a defense last year that was elite. Like legitimately, the Chargers, not many people know this, but the Chargers allowed fewer points per game than the Jaguars did last year. Their defense was top notch. Do we think that Joey Bosa changed it that much? Yeah, I mean, he obviously affected it, but missing Bosa, those things obviously mattered, but I think they're not as bad as some people may have thought. So, I mean, this is a game where you definitely need a touchdown out of Hyde. I always worry about Hyde and the fact that, it's almost like the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing where, they drafted Nick Chubb at the top of the second round. They obviously have plans for the kid. He has looked good in recent games. So it's like, do they start giving him more work at some point and say, Carlos, we love what you're doing, but we're gonna ease you up on the workload a little bit. I don't know. So I mean, and again, looking at the Chargers, the guys they've played Todd Gurley, they've played Kareem Hunt, LaShawn McCoy, Matt Breida, Marshawn Lynch. So it is pretty good. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's just like Gurley was the only one able to score more than 10.8 PPR points against them. So Hyde for me he's not on my cash game radar. And honestly, I wouldn't play him in tournaments either.
He's on my radar for sure, but like behind Gurley, McCaffrey, Gordon, there's no one that's really all that safe. Like I feel like if those guys miss, they're going to miss by just a couple points. If Hyde misses, I think that it could be, he gets 7 or 8 points, and that could really kill you. Plus, I don't think he really has the upside of guys like Tevin Coleman or even Joe Mixon.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like that's the price range he fell into. Is that like that Tevin Coleman range? Like Tevin Coleman now, he was nowhere on my radar, obviously, before Devonta Freeman. And this, obviously, keep in mind if you're listening, like this all has to do with Devonta Freeman being out of the lineup, which I'm expecting him to be. But Tevin Coleman, I think in that price range, he's the one I'd go with.
Yeah, at 500 more, that makes a ton more sense. It got to the point, though, when you're building lineups early in the week, we just didn't really have any value, right? So just trying to scrape the barrel with some of these players down there. Like I have some biases, I guess, towards Peyton Barber, too, just because he performed so well in my running back methodology last summer. But, I mean, you just can't really, even at 3,500, what do you think his touch expectation is? I'm just trying to figure out what the best cheap piece of this game is to attack besides Brait.
I feel like, honest to God, I'm not just speaking this to say it to be a shocking response. I think it's very possible that Peyton Barber's inactive for this game. I think they might give him the Ronald Jones treatment, like saying basically so that say that we're going to go at Ronald Jones and we're not turning back. It's like we have to see what we have in this kid. We spent a second round pick on him. There's so much equity here. They went to him the second half against the Bears.
Yeah, if we play that, I'm playing Ronald Jones. No doubt about it in cash games.
Yeah, Ronald Jones at 3,900. I do want to see the inactive list between those teams, but I think one of those guys is going to be a play. Like if Ronald Jones was inactive, but I don't think he's going to be. If he was inactive, I'd play Barber, and if Barber's inactive, I'd probably want to play Ronald Jones, to be honest with you, at 3,900.
Yeah, I just don't know what to do without my pass-catching running back against Atlanta this week that I just had in my lineup. So it's
Jaquiz Rodgers?
Yeah, right? Like, it's tough.
So, guys, everyone's always busy trying to win that $1 million on FanDuel. And, I love that contest. But my focus is on getting the World Fantasy Football Championship. It's this live event where you travel to New York City with like 80 guys and you're competing against them. You watch all the games together and you can win some seriously big prizes. So it's like a satellite. You have to beat out this week 7,200 people to get in, just an $8 entry fee. That's what I'll be playing. Joe, have you been to one of these live events?
I went to the DraftKings Week 1 party, but that's the only like main kind of live event I've been to. They're a ton of fun, though. I definitely recommend any of you guys can get to those. It's awesome.
Man, it is on my bucket list for sure. So that's what I'm investing in when I play GPP contests. And on FanDuel, like I said, they've got the World Fantasy Football Championship qualifier. It is an $8 entry fee, and you have to beat out 7,200 people. So it's not like the biggest shot in the dark. Like, you've actually got a chance at taking this thing down, getting the trip to New York City, and having a chance at winning $500,000 at the live event. So check it out on FanDuel.com. All right, guys, on over to wide receiver. And this year I've been spending up on wide receiver so much more. Like, usually there's a couple, I don't know, cheaper plays that you can definitely feel safe using, but I just want the targets. And if you can get the targets, man, I feel a lot better about my lineup. Joe, how do you feel this week? Are you spending up at wide receiver?
Yeah, it's another one of those weeks where I'm probably going to play Julio, and I'm probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, yep.
It's a Julio week, man.
Yeah, I mean, that always goes right. So I don't know. It's tough. He's 7,900. Like, he's at the top of pretty much everything I'm looking at, right? So it's looking like a week where you got to do everything you can do to fit in Julio. It just seems like anytime this guy is massively owned, he disappoints. So I think you could have made a lot of money in the last couple of years just fading Julio when he's over 15% owned. And you'd be a rich person right now, but I mean, I get it. The matchup against, he's probably going to see mostly Carlton Davis, right? Which is he's just going to destroy that guy. I don't really have a ton to say. He's a phenomenal play at 7,900. He's probably still value at that point. He just hasn't scored a touchdown, and he's going to eventually, right?
Tags over under 150 yards for Julio this week.
I mean, 150 is it's quite high.
I know it is, man, but
high expectation. I'm not saying it's not possible, because if anybody can do it, Julio can. And I just want to mention, so Julio has had 2 weeks this year where he's gone 29 or more points, and those weeks there was no shadow coverage with Philly and Cincinnati. All right, so the weeks where he's let you down, it's almost like Matt Ryan just stays away from him. He doesn't target him as much in those games where there's a shadow. With James Bradbury, Marshawn Lattimore, and Lattimore shadowed him until the end of the game, where he went over to Ridley, and then all of a sudden Julio catches like a bomb. It was like a 58-yard pass or something like that. But then you go to last week. Everybody liked Julio last week, and I think it was for good reason. That this is something we could not have predicted. So the Steelers run a lot of zone coverage the majority of the time. All the way up until week 5, that's how it was. They actually used Joe Hayden in shadow coverage last week. So Joe Hayden shadowed Julio Jones, and therefore Matt Ryan, it discombobulated him. He was all confused. The Bucs don't shadow. The Bucs don't. They have a rookie cornerback out there. You mentioned it, Joe. Carlton Davis is out there. Julio moves all over the formation, so he's going to see a lot of everyone. But I mean, let's not act like we're scared of Brent Grimes either. The guy's like 5'10". So Julio Jones, best wide receiver play on the board. I would play him over Antonio Brown. Last week, I was forced to make a decision between these two, and I said that Antonio Brown was my lock, and obviously that worked out. But Julio's the number one play on my board.
Yeah, Julio is my number one as well. By the way, Brent Grimes' wife is going to fight you for that comment.
Bring it on, lady.
I love Antonio Brown as well. I think DeAndre Hopkins is a good play this week. Do you think that either of these guys, Joe, are even close to the same level as Julio Jones in terms of, a value play this week?
Yeah, so AB is considerably more expensive, but the ownership discount you're going to get off of Julio definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm a little bit worried about this matchup in Cincinnati. I really respect the Cincinnati defense. I think their pass rush is really solid. The splits are dramatic. Don't need to spend more than 3 seconds to talk about the Pittsburgh road splits, but it's definitely something that I think is something you need to consider if you're going to pay that much for a wide receiver when you're most of the time going to try and jam in those touches at running back or get to a guy like Julio for considerably cheaper. My issue with Julio is still, like, if they want to use him and target him 15, 20 times like they probably should, like they probably just blow the Bucs out in this game, right? But do we think the Falcons are going to use him that way? I struggle trusting this coaching staff with Julio. It's a scary play. It's one that I'm going to be literally deciding probably the morning of if I'm actually going to pull the trigger on it.
I've got Julio as my number one wide receiver this week, but in terms of must plays at wide receiver, for me, it's Mike Evans. I mean, you look at his PPR points so far this season, 28, 22, 26. Yeah, he had 12 against Chicago, but we already talked about how that's a bad matchup. He goes to Atlanta this week. It's going to be a shootout. Mike Evans is a lot cheaper than some of these guys. I think he's a phenomenal play. I'm getting him and Julio Jones in every single lineup.
I have no issue stacking that game. Mike Evans is like the preferred play there for sure. Like you have to look at Deshaun Jackson a little bit too. Like I don't think Deshaun Jackson's a cash play or anything like that, but Deshaun Jackson is the one who's primarily going to see Isaiah Oliver, the rookie, in coverage, whereas Mike Evans will see Robert Alford the majority of the time. So, I mean, going back to last year against a fully healthy Falcons team, Evans totaled 6 catches for 78 yards in the first meeting, 5 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown in the second meeting. So, yeah, I'm not scared to play Mike Evans in this matchup. I think he's worth his price. If you could fit both him and Julio in, I'm fine stacking that game. But, Joe, if you had to choose between Mike Evans and someone like Keenan Allen, which way would you go?
Yeah, I like Keenan Allen. I think I like Keenan Allen and Landry in this matchup. It's kind of a situation where both these defenses really struggle against those kind of interior wide receivers, right? So Keenan Allen at 7,500, I think he has a little bit more upside than Evans, especially when Evans is going to be I would assume he's going to be highly owned compared to Keenan Allen at a pretty similar price. I definitely understand the Evans play. There's just so many plays in this game that if you're trying to pick one of them out of it, you're probably going to be disappointed. But I definitely think that Evans is more of like a game stack play for me.
Yeah. Guys, I'm looking at Keenan Allen's game log, and he's only hit 2.5x value once all season. It was against Kansas City. Does this concern you guys, or is it just like the matchup is so good that you would play him anyway?
Well, I mean, the thing is like his value has been down, and you can't just wait till he hits value and then like, oh, now I'm going to play him. Like, I understand that, but he's been getting the targets. Like all the vital statistics, like his vital signs are good, right? He's getting the targets. Phillip Rivers is playing really good football. The matchup against the Browns. So he played this defense last year, and he totaled 10 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. So now, there's some different parts, obviously, on the defense, but it's under the same coordinator, so they understand the defense. It worked for Keenan Allen with the scheme. They have TJ Carey playing the slot now. Over the last 2 weeks, he's allowed 11 of 15 targets to be completed for 113 yards. He's not great, and even if they go to Bobby Calhoun, he hasn't played very well this year either. So I'm curious to see how they handle Keenan Allen. Denzel Ward won't see Keenan Allen, and that's a really good thing because Denzel Ward has proven to be every bit worth a first-round pick that they spent on him. But yeah, Keenan Allen, it's just like looking at this game and figuring out who Phillip Rivers is going to throw to, who makes the most sense, who did it against them last year. I understand the 7,500 price tag, but with the targets he gets, he's one of the safer wide receivers in the slate.
I think he's definitely the likeliest to turn like kind of a big play against this defense just because of how they defend. I'm a little bit nervous. You mentioned the targets, like he's being used. I get that, but he's only had double-digit targets twice this year, and for a guy at 7,500, I think that the way he's used is very safe, but it's going to take a lot for him to completely smash value. But I understand, like this matchup sets up so well for him. I think this is the week that I haven't rostered him once this year, but I think this week I'm definitely going to consider it.
Nice.
I'm looking at the mid-range plays, and there are 4 that really stand out to me at least. Tyler Boyd at home against Pittsburgh, Jarvis Landry at home against the Chargers, Robert Woods, especially if Cooper Kupp and or Brandon Cooks is out, but they go against Denver, and then John Brown at Tennessee, he's a great play, frankly, every week. Tags, are these your top 4 in the mid-range too? Does someone else sneak in there? Do one of these guys stand out above the best? Probably Landry, since you already mentioned him.
Yeah, I like Landry an awful lot. That's why I'm curious to hear Joe's take on him. Like to hear what led him to Landry. Obviously, he's not going to have to face the 2 outside corners in Trevor Williams or Casey Hayward, which is always a good thing. Baker Mayfield has been playing phenomenal. Like that's the thing is Baker's going to be a star in this league. Like the fact that he's thrown a couple interceptions the last few weeks, like don't be mad at that. Like he's learning the windows, he's learning the timing. He doesn't have a prototypical number 1 receiver. He's going to be fine. But like in this range, like John Brown was someone that I came across that I kind of like too. I like Landry, but I don't know if I can fit him into lineups. Like that's the issue. He's like 6,600. He's not really cheap, but he's been getting targeted an awful lot. I'm going down a lot. Like I'm going down to like Mohamed Sanu, I think is a phenomenal play at 4,800. And in cash, I am having issues staying away from Chester Rogers at 4,500. And I know it's hard playing guys that you really don't believe in, but at the same time, it's like last week, the reason we played Valdez Scantling was because like the volume was going to be there. This quarterback's good. Chester Rogers at 4,500. Like, he's seen 11 targets in each of the last 2 weeks. Like, they can't run the ball. Like, they just lost another offensive lineman. Matt Slauson is probably out for the year. So now they're missing 3 of their 5 offensive linemen. One of the other ones is a rookie in Quentin Nelson. So, like, there's so many things on this Colts team that they're going to have to use that short passing game. And Buster Screen, their starting slot cornerback, who's bad to begin with, is dealing with an injury. I think he suffered a concussion too. So Perry Nickerson is going to be covering the slot. Joe, I really want to hear about Landry, and I want you to talk about maybe this whole Colts situation. Is there any value to be had between someone like Chester Rogers or even Ryan Grant?
Yeah, so if you take out the Tyreek Hill game, I think the best way to kind of beat this Chargers defense consistently has been with short passes over the middle. So it sets up really well for Jarvis Landry. It sets up really well for David Njoku. Mayfield's been kind of locking into those guys quite a bit. The efficiency hasn't quite been there. Like, Landry's only caught 9 of his 20 targets, but I think at the price, the usage is definitely going to be there. He's a guy that's top 6 in Whopper and some air yard stuff that I've been looking at. And at 6,600, I do think he's a solid price, but I would agree with you. Like, after you get past, like, if you're going to roster Julio, if you're going to roster some of these running backs, you do kind of need to pay down. Chester Rogers is one of my favorite value plays right now. He's a guy that I'm definitely kind of considering. He's popping in a lot of the value stuff, I think, for a lot of the things that you mentioned about kind of the injuries there. But same kind of thing. Like, I think that the way that they use him sets up really well. So I think he's one of the guys that I'm looking to pay down for. I think that Sutton is interesting, but he's probably a little bit more touchdown dependent than Chester. So I think that Sutton in tournaments makes some sense, but I'm kind of locked into both of those guys right now as far as paying all the way down. But it just feels like a week that there isn't someone that just like is a glaring value play at wide receiver, which is going to make things really tough in roster construction.
11 targets for Chester Rogers each of the last 2 games. He's like the reverse of Quincy Enunwa. And Enunwa, his price point, is somebody that I still like a little bit. I don't think I can play him in cash games, though. Can you guys stomach it?
I need to see how they're using him, if they're going to put him back in the slot. Because you made a point last week. You said last week that they put him on the perimeter to avoid Chris Harris Jr. And I mean, it's possible. I'm not going to say it's not. And that's the thing is, that's one of those things I want to pay attention to. But being that I don't know where he's playing on the field right now, that's a problem.
Yeah. Now, Joe, Tags mentioned Jarvis Landry as being his favorite of the bunch. Would you consider one of those guys that I mentioned, Tyler Boyd? Would you consider one of those guys I mentioned, maybe Tyler Boyd, Robert Woods, if the guys are out, and John Brown?
Yeah, I like that range quite a bit. Robert Woods, another one of those guys that pops in all the air yards type stuff. And if the target share is going to be extremely condensed, it's one of those games it's going to be a really high total when we normally have a wider funnel of where that usage is going to go. So I think Woods makes a decent amount of sense. John Brown's always a guy that I feel like is in consideration. Really like that game for pace. So I think if I was to kind of look at it from more of a broad perspective, that Baltimore and Tennessee game looks like it's going to set up for a ton of plays. And he looks like a really good price for a guy that is being used like a number 1 wide receiver and still 5,500.
Tags, any other cheap plays that you like before we move on?
Not really in cash right now. Like I mentioned Mohamed Sanu, I think he's very playable in cash.
Man, these value plays it's ugly this week. I'm not very excited about what I'm seeing. So obviously at tight end, I mean, I would assume we're all going Cameron Brate. Is that right?
Yeah, I like Brate quite a bit. I mean, he was one of the top targets for Winston in the red zone. If we look back to last year, he saw 13 red zone looks last year, 5 red zone touchdowns at 3,700. One of the biggest things at tight end is trying to attack these high team totals, right? Because it's such a touchdown dependent position. So I really like Brate. He's again at the top of pretty much everything. I think it's interesting to go back to Vance McDonald at 3,400 just because he burned everyone last week. Or he's not playing a ton of snaps, but the way he's used, I still think there's a chance that Ben locks into him at some point, and it would just make a lot of sense for this matchup when Cincinnati is going to be giving a lot of pressure. I think Vance McDonald at 3,400 is someone that I'm going to be considering again, definitely in tournaments to kind of get off Brate at a similar price point.
Tags, is there anyone else you're even considering at tight end besides Brate? For me, there's no way that I would play anyone else. McDonald's not a bad call at all, but Brate in cash games, like I mentioned last year, he was the number 4 fantasy tight end in the 7 games he started.
I think Austin Hooper is still interesting in this game. The Bucs have...
You would use him in cash?
I'd consider him.
Oh man, you are bold.
I'm telling you, attack this game. Like seriously, I'm picking the over on this one. It's 57.5. I'm going over. There's going to be so many passing attempts here, especially knowing that Devonta Freeman's out. Tevin Coleman hasn't run the ball very good recently. They're going to throw the ball. I like everybody on Atlanta. Like seriously, like start Matt Ryan and like stack that game. I like it. I think CJ Uzomah can be considered too. He's only 3,000. If you really, really need to save some money, that's where I would go. But yeah, Brate's probably my tight end, but I'm saying that Hooper should be at least be considered.
Mike, don't do the Austin Hooper thing to me, man. Like he's like my kryptonite. Like I mentioned the high team totals that I like to target these really cheap tight ends. Like I play Austin Hooper probably more than most people, and of course get off of him last week to play McDonald, and it just buries me.
Yeah, me too.
Hooper's kind of like the play like Julio. I choose the wrong week every week. So if I'm not playing Hooper this week, I'll be sure and let everyone know so that they can jam into every team.
There you go.
All right, guys. DST and Joe, you said defense doesn't matter.
I don't know where I fall on that side of that debate. I do think that defense matters. I think maybe it matters less than some people think. But I mean, if defense didn't matter, I don't feel the need to get involved in those kind of arguments on Twitter, but it was kind of fun to watch. I do think that defense matters. And I think if defense didn't matter, there'd be some people out there that it would have been capitalizing that and making a lot of money because of it. But yeah, as far as the defensive side of things, I think you can pay all the way down for the Dallas Cowboys at $2,300 in cash games.
On DraftKings, on FanDuel, they're not that price. They're $4,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, but $2,300 opens up so much. I mean, they're one of the lowest salaries. It's a good spot. I mean, the Jaguars have a 20.7 turnover rate. That's the worst in the league. The Cowboys quietly rank third in pressures this year, averaging 3 sacks per game. 2,300. I want pressure. I want pass attempts. I think I'm going to get both.
Norwell's out as well.
Exactly.
Well, he's probably going to be out.
Yeah, I didn't know if he was officially out yet, but if he is out, I'm with Joe on that one. Dallas low. If you're paying up, go to the Bears.
I like the Browns on FanDuel at 3,200 going up against the Chargers. Like Rivers has been better this year, but he's always been a turnover kind of guy. And this Browns defense, I won't quite say it's top 5 in the leagues yet, but in terms of points allowed, man, they have been phenomenal.
One other team I'll mention if you want to pay up, I think the Vikings are interesting at home against this Cardinals team. So Vikings are 7th in quarterback hurries and hits per Sports Info Solutions, but they shouldn't have any issues generating kind of a decent amount of pressure. Pro Football Focus has this pass blocking unit at number 30. So at 3,800, like, you're probably not going to make there in cash because things are tight. But if you want to kind of pay up to be contrarian in tournaments, I think the Vikings at home are a really good play.
Yeah, I like them for GPP, not so much for cash. If I'm paying up for cash, I want the Jags pretty much every week except against the Chiefs. I wouldn't have used them against the Patriots, but I mean, they give up 15 points to the Giants, 20 to the Patriots, 9 to the Titans, 12 to the Jets. And you know they get after the quarterback, they force turnovers, they can score touchdowns like better than anybody else. So I don't mind using the Jags this week. I don't have enough money to do it myself. Tags, is there a GPP play? We're going in reverse now, a GPP play you like in DST? We'll try to keep this a lot shorter. Just, give us your name, maybe a brief amount of analysis.
I don't even know if I want to say it because I don't feel great about it, but I think the Bills are actually a decent GPP play against Houston. They're 2,200. I mean,
yeah, Watson's a gunslinger, man.
It allows you to do some crazy things in your lineup. You know they're going to get some sacks. Their defense has actually played a lot better the last few weeks. I don't want to not give them credit because it's like 12 points allowed to the Titans last week, 22 to the Packers, 6 to the Vikings. They've played really good defense, so I think that they're like one of those defenses that they allow you to save a lot of money. And I'd probably go there. I
kind of like the Steelers in GPP. I mean, they have 2 games with 6+ sacks. They can get after the quarterback. Yeah, they might give up 40 points, but you know what? If they can pick off Andy Dalton, who's not the best quarterback in the world, or the Steelers get up big and Dalton has to throw a bunch of passes, I could see this being a game script where they end up getting a touchdown.
I don't mind that. One thing that I'll mention still about the Jaguars that's my concern if I'm paying up is that Prescott just doesn't throw a lot of passes, right? He's only 20th in pass attempts this season, and that's one of the things that's really important to me at defense. I do really like that. I mean, he's taking a lot of sacks, 5th highest rate in the league, so I do like that quite a bit. I get that they're probably going to be popular just because the Cowboys' implied total is so low, but I don't really care a lot about implied total. I want pass attempts and I want pressure. Another one that kind of stands out to me on the other side of that game, Tags, is Houston at 3,500. We have them for the highest projected sacks in our models right now by a significant margin, just because of how many sacks that Josh Allen takes. I think he's got 19 already this year at over 13% of his dropback. So interested in the Texans at 3,500, but I don't think they'll be extremely contrarian. So trying to get a feel for some of the ownership here at these. But I think if I'm paying down, it's going to be for Dallas. And then I'm kind of looking in the Minnesota or Houston range if I'm paying up.
Now, I've got two plays at tight end that I like for GPP, but Joe, we'll let you go first.
I'll go with Austin Hooper, my boy, just because 3,500 opens up a ton. He's a really nice price point off of where Cameron Brate is in this exact game. I think that I don't know if there's people that are going to really chase his game last week, so maybe he'll go a little higher owned than I think. But that massive team total there, a slight favorite, so hopefully that game shoots out. Just trying to get pieces of this Atlanta-Tampa Bay game makes a lot of sense to me.
Tags, who's your guy?
I mean, he already mentioned Vance McDonald. I think he's a good play in tournaments. I don't think I'd use him in cash, but I think in tournaments he's a good one. But if you want to go down and if you're looking for a completely 1% owned option, I think you could look at Gerald Everett or Tyler Higbee. I don't know which one to choose. That's the part where I'm like, I hate saying this because I think one of them could have a big game, especially if Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp aren't involved in the game plan as much as they typically would be. Denver has been pretty terrible against tight ends over the last 2 years. So I think one of those at 2,900, not a bad option.
I said I've got two. Guess I've actually got four. Two of them are pretty contrarian. First of all, Nick Vannett against Oakland, 2,900. We know how much Russell Wilson loves his tight ends. Hayden Hurst, 2,700 at Tennessee. He didn't do anything in his first week, but they used him so much in the preseason. It's pretty apparent that they have big plans for him. I don't know if it happens this week or 3 weeks down the road or whenever, but it's going to happen eventually. I don't mind getting shares of him before it happens, just in case it is this week. And then my two plays that I really like, David Njoku, just because he's a touchdown machine. It hasn't happened this year, but he's going to be. There's going to be one of these games where he catches 2, maybe even 3 touchdown passes, so I want exposure every week. And then Trey Burton against Miami. He's been good, guys. I know everyone thinks he's been a disappointment. He's been fine. He's $4,500.
Yeah, he's like the number 9 tight end points per game. He hasn't been great, but he hasn't been as terrible as some people think. I think some people that maybe have Trey Burton or something like in a redraft league, they just assume that the tight end position, there's so much better stuff out there, and there's really not.
Exactly. All right, guys, wide receiver, Joe, you're first again.
Yeah, so we have a metric at FantasyLabs that I've been kind of using at wide receiver for tournaments. It's called leverage score. So it basically kind of allocates our ownership and our ceiling projections together, has a different weight there. And someone that's kind of popping in that this week is Doug Baldwin. I get it. Last week, 1 target. It just feels like the Baldwin, Vance McDonald teams are going to win all the money this week just because everyone was on them last week. He only saw 1 target, but he played 53 of 60 snaps. He ran 24 of 26 possible pass routes. I think it's a really good spot for him to attack this Oakland defense. They're a lot better on the outside than they are over the middle. So I think that Baldwin kind of at 5,300, especially if his ownership is down to the 5 to 8% range like we're projecting, I think he's a really solid GPP play.
Tags, why don't you give us one name, and then I'll go and we'll circle back around for maybe 1 or 2 more each.
Man, Joe mentioned it in the cash segment, but I think Cortland Sutton is a good play at 3,500. He's so cheap. And looking at the Rams defense has been terrible. Guys, if you haven't taken notice, they haven't been very good. Marcus Peters hasn't been very good. Sam Shields got benched last week. There's just so much going on there that Cortland Sutton is now averaging 5.2 targets per game. He's seen at least 6 targets in each of the last 2 games, which is, by the way, what Demaryius Thomas is averaging over the last 3 games. So it's these two are getting closer and closer together. So if you were to get Demaryius Thomas...
And Sutton's just a better football player. He's awesome.
Well, right now, yeah. And if you were to get Demaryius Thomas, that's the thing. If you were to get Demaryius Thomas for 3,500, you want to play him. So, I mean, that's the thing. So, I mean, I like him an awful lot.
Chris Godwin for me, guys. I mean, obviously I'm going to be stacking this Tampa Bay Atlanta game in GPP a lot, but not a lot of people are going to be going, Jameis Winston with Chris Godwin as their only receiver. They're going to be getting Mike Evans and Cameron Brate, Deshaun Jackson a lot. I'm cool with going Jameis Winston, Chris Godwin, and then stacking 3 players on the Falcons. I don't think anyone else, well, some people are going to do it because there's a lot of GPP lineups out there, but I could see Godwin having a huge game.
Godwin definitely can. I wish he'd get more snaps. That's my only concern with him.
Yeah, man. Me too. Joe, who's your next guy?
I hate to even say it, but I'm still trying to figure out pieces of this Baltimore-Tennessee game just because I like the pace so much for that. But I want to hear Mike's take on Corey Davis. It's one of the worst matchups possible, but a guy that's seeing a ton of volume. This isn't a very high volume offense as far as pass attempts, but I mean, it is relatively condensed. He's seeing targets. Talking about leverage score, he's our second highest leverage score guy. So I'm always trying to figure out why I guess these guys are extremely low owned. It's probably the matchup, but kind of one of the lowest owned pieces in this high paced game. I do like John Brown a lot, who you talked about. He was kind of the guy in this game that I was thinking I'd get some lower ownership on, maybe not. But Mike, what do you think about Corey Davis? Am I nuts?
Yeah, I probably. No, I mean, the thing is,
I think you got to be nuts in GPP sometimes, though. Like, Tex, we talked about this last show about how Corey Davis is this not elite wide receiver yet, but second tier wide receiver, and you can't fade him against these. Like, I'm not benching Corey Davis this week. He could break out. He's good enough that he can dominate a good defense.
no, I mean, I'm not saying he can't, but I'm saying his quarterback cannot. His quarterback's terrible. Like, Marcus Mariota just looks bad. So the thing is like, Baltimore is still yet to allow a receiver more than 91 yards through the air. With the one stat that you can go to is that any wide receiver who has seen at least 9 targets against them has totaled at least 60 yards, but that's not going to win you a tournament.
You give me 60 yards and 2 touchdowns out of Corey Davis, I'm happy in GPP.
But he's not going to score 2 touchdowns because Marcus Mariota, I don't think he's thrown 2 touchdowns all year.
Just because it hasn't happened in 3 games that he started doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
No, I'm just saying, like,
okay.
I understand the idea that you have to be crazy sometimes, but I think this is just almost like overdoing it, that you don't need to do it. I think there's other plays that you could probably do that with. I think the Doug Baldwin call I like that one a lot.
I love that one. I'm sticking with the same game tags. I know it's your turn, but I'm skipping you because you were wrong about Corey Davis. Michael Crabtree. We know he scored some touchdowns, right?
I have on my list, man. I think he scores his first touchdown since week 1. Malcolm Butler's been terrible ever since coming to the Titans, and that's who he's going to see the majority of time in coverage. And if they stick Crabtree in man-to-man coverage, it's not a bad matchup for him at all. And at 4,700, he's not a bad price. I like Juju a lot at 7,300. Knowing that Roethlisberger struggles on the road, looking at the matchups and thinking, like, if William Jackson actually plays cornerback like we know he can, Antonio Brown should have his hands somewhat full. Juju, I mean, his target share has been there. You look at Darqueze Dennard is the slot cornerback for Cincinnati. Because the thing is, we know Roethlisberger's not going to get shut out. Like, it's not going to at least, like, completely shut out. So that's why it's like Vance McDonald, Juju Smith-Schuster. They're a way to go away from Antonio Brown, get some exposure in case they do play well on offense. So that's probably my next favorite one. I mean, Brandon Cooks, if he plays, he'd be a phenomenal play.
Yeah, and that's in that same game. So if some of these LA wide receivers miss, can we consider a guy like Josh Reynolds for just a really cheap play? I'm trying to think. I think I still prefer Chester Rogers in that range, but I think if we have a condensed target share in LA with some of these wide receivers out, that Josh Reynolds is going to be pretty popular in that high total game.
Okay, guys, here's how we're going to wrap up wide receivers before we go to running back. We're just going to go lightning round. Name 2 guys. Tags your first.
There's a lot of lower level, like I just say to read the primer. There's some players in there that are going to be like lower owned, but like Adam Thielen's a name I'll throw out there because he's 8,500. People aren't going to want to pay for him in this matchup where the Vikings aren't expected to pass. But Budda Baker's been awful out of the slot. Like in coverage, he might be the worst slot cornerback in the game, like allowing the most. So Adam Thielen's matchup is pristine. So I think you're going to get lower ownership on him than some would think.
Joe, do you have any more names at wide receiver?
Yeah, that was pretty much everyone on my list. The one that was popping to me was Josh Reynolds. So I think that's one that I'm going to be looking at a little bit deeper if kind of as the week goes with those injuries we're keeping an eye on in LA.
I love stacking the Rams this week because Denver is – a lot of people are going to avoid them because they still think that they're Denver. And everyone's like, well, the Rams are all banged up. It's like the perfect storm, right? I could definitely see Jared Goff hanging 40 points on Denver this week.
If he's got his receivers, he definitely could.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If Brandon Cooks plays and everyone's like, well, he's banged up, I don't want to play him. You get yourself Jared Goff, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods. I think you could eat this week, man. I need to stop saying man so much. We get all these reviews on iTunes, and we really appreciate you guys sending them in. We read every single one of them, but like every once in a while, someone's like, man, Bobby needs to stop saying man so much. Tags, you have a couple phrases like that too, but I keep hearing it. Now that I'm reading these, I keep hearing myself saying, I'm like, what is wrong with me, man? You know? Okay, running backs, guys. Joe, we'll let you start off for a good GPP play.
Yeah, so I'm going to be at the Vikings game watching my Cardinals. The last time I was there, I had 0 David Johnson, and he scored 2 touchdowns. So I'm going to make sure I have a little bit of David Johnson exposure in tournaments. At 5,900, I don't love his usage. I mean, it's tough. He's never been like a dominant between the tackles runner, right? And he's gotten a lot of carries. I'm just jamming him into the line. He's not being used in the passing game the way he should. But technically, they should be using him in the passing game. And it's something I didn't even realize until today. Minnesota's actually 32nd in DVOA against running backs in the passing game. So, I mean, they've been susceptible. They haven't been tackling well to some of those short passes to running backs. So, I mean, if they get David Johnson involved, I don't think they will. But at 5,900, especially if people are still kind of off of that train, I think it makes some sense from a volume spot.
Where are you looking, Tags?
If we see Dalvin Cook get in like a full practice by the time they play this game, do we think that he's a good tournament play?
No. Do you think there's any scenario where he gets more than 15 touches?
I mean, I don't think they're going to play him if he's not 100%. I think they learned their lesson. Like, that's why I think they set him last week. If not, then it's like, do you think Latavius Murray is a good tournament play? Because someone's going to score touchdowns there. It's going to happen.
If Dalvin Cook's out, I'm playing Latavius Murray in cash games.
Well, for sure, but I think Dalvin Cook's going to play. If he plays, do we want to play either of these guys?
Yeah, I think Latavius makes more sense if he doesn't play, obviously. But in tournaments, like I mean, they're going to have to lean on the run a little bit more than normal, you would assume, just how much they've been passing. But yeah, I think Latavius makes some sense at his price. I mean, if he gets 16 to 20 touches, but if he's getting anything less than that, he just seems like kind of a touchdown or bust guy, which we've already talked about a couple of those. So I don't think he's significantly worse than any of those other guys. But I think there's kind of like some sneaky upside, I guess, for Murray, if there's any kind of doubt about Cook, which there probably will be.
Here's my favorite GPP running back, guys, and nobody is going to be on him. But Peyton Barber, in the first week, he had 19 carries. Second week, he went up against Philadelphia, so just forget that game. Third week, they were passing the whole time against Pittsburgh. Week 4 against Chicago, so forget it. Week 6, they get Atlanta. And everyone thinks Ronald Jones is going to be in there. What if Peyton Barber's in there and he gets 20 touches again?
Like I said at the beginning of the show, if you were to tell me that Peyton Barber is active and Ronald Jones is inactive, I'll play Peyton Barber. If you were to tell me vice versa, I'll play Ronald Jones. If both of them are active, what do you do? Because there's no way. I mean, we've already seen Dirk Cutter have like literally the shortest leash for Ryan Fitzpatrick. What makes us think that Peyton Barber's any different? Do you think he's a generational talent? Do you think he's the future of this team? That's my.
I'm not saying it's a big percentage play. I'm saying that nobody's going to be on him. And there's like a 5 or 10% chance that Barber has a big game against Atlanta.
I think some more people might be on him than you think because they haven't announced Ronald Jones as the starter.
I guess you're right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm living in my own world where I'm like, obviously Ronald Jones is going to be the starter. You know what I mean?
I kind of agree with Mike. I think that the Bucs may have seen enough of kind of the feature Peyton Barber game at this point. I don't know. I'm probably the worst person to ever talk to about GPP running backs because I just basically play the chalk at running back and get contrarian in other ways.
Well, you've also won a lot of GPP contests, so maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, I play a lot of the small field stuff, right? So I don't really get too crazy at running back. I usually have a pretty small core there. But Barber, if you're really trying to save some salary, it does make some sense if there's one of these guys for some reason not active. But I think there's a ton of good options at running back, even in the mid-range this week. I don't think you really have to go there.
Tags, who else do you have?
As I mentioned, Ronald Jones I like. I think Bilal Powell is an interesting guy.
Yes. I
mean, I know a lot of people are going to play Crowell this week, and it makes sense. Crowell's not a bad play. He's only 5,000. But the thing is like looking at the matchup, the Colts have allowed a lot through the air to running backs. They haven't allowed so much on the ground, especially when Darius Leonard's healthy and on the field. He expects to play this week. So if they're going to move the ball through the air, I mean, Bilal Powell is the pass-catching back. He has double the targets that Isaiah Crowell does, so he's an interesting play. There's 2 more plays I want to mention here in tournaments.
Don't take mine.
Lamar Miller.
Lamar Miller's not mine. You can have him.
4,700 against the Bills. I mean, I'll attack the Bills defense like against the run. I mean, again, they've played better as of late, so that's why I'm not going to play Lamar Miller in cash or anything like that. That's just asking for problems. But I think that Buffalo, it's possible their run defense is still bad. They just haven't faced very good running backs recently. And then Austin Eckler at 4,200 received at least 7 touches in every game and up to 14 touches at points. So we know that the Browns' weakness is their run defense. So I think Eckler is an interesting play.
I'm really glad you left Adrian Peterson for me because he.
Oh God.
Oh, gross.
What a great
Everybody
reaction.
Just seriously cover your ears right now. Fast forward. Don't do it. Don't do it.
He looks good, man.
He looked bad last week. Actually, he looked very stiff.
Yeah, he was banged up.
And he's still banged up. They're saying that he's actually questionable for this game to even play. And then Chris Thompson's banged up. It's like they don't know if he's playing. And against Carolina, nah.
There's a chance that he gets 30 touches.
Joe, am I on my mind here? Is Bobby out of his mind?
No, I just brought it up. So I charted Adrian Peterson for my rushing expectation methodology in the summer. Last season when he was with the Cardinals, he was a 10th percentile expectation score as a runner. So basically what that means is after you adjust for what his offensive line did historically and then his efficiency, he was one of the worst guys I've ever sampled, and I've got over 1,000 players in my sample dating back to 2008 now. So bottom 10 percentile.
Yeah, last year he was awful. Arizona's offensive line, as we know, is one of the 3 worst in football. Washington's, this is the best offensive line he's ever been behind. He tore it up in week 1. He tore it up in week 3 against a decent Green Bay front 7. Carolina's is a little bit better, but if we're talking about a guy who's going to be less than 0.5% owned, who has a chance to get 25, 30 touches, I want exposure. I don't care if he's bad. I don't care if it's a good matchup. I want exposure.
Yeah, I mean, his floor is lower than kind of I would love. I mean, the usage should be there. He's not going to be a guy that wins you a GPP in my opinion. So my official stance is my contrarian play is Carlos Hyde and play Christian McCaffrey.
All right. Okay, quarterbacks. Tags, well, you go first this time.
Andrew Luck is not a bad tournament play.
Well, yeah, if he's going to throw 80 passes every game.
That's the point. I mean, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be great. But the thing is, turn away. He's going to have some rushing totals here at some point. I know he didn't last week, but he's going to have some rushing totals. He's going to throw some touchdowns. He's probably going to throw some picks. But he's probably going to finish as a top 8 fantasy quarterback. And at 6,200 in a tournament, that'll work out. I also think Baker Mayfield is an interesting play.
Yeah, I like Baker Mayfield a lot. I'm not really sure what the ownership's going to be, but a guy that I keep kind of coming back to is Kirk Cousins.
That's who I was going to go with, yeah.
Yeah, I think that if he's anywhere close to like that 5 to 10% range, he just sets up really well. The Cardinals have faced the lowest average depth of target in the entire NFL this year. So with kind of that zone scheme, it pushes to a lot of these like short completions, right? Instead of trying to attack deep. And I think that it sets up well for some of these wide receivers. Obviously a little bit worried about Diggs and Patrick Peterson. But yeah, it's probably a slight downgrade for the passing game overall. That's why we were talking about some of the running backs for Minnesota. But I think as a tournament play, it's a nice pivot off of Matt Ryan, right? Because of the price, like Kirk Cousins at 6,700, Matt Ryan at 6,800 on DraftKings with a pretty similar ceiling, I would imagine. I'm kind of on Kirk Cousins in tournaments again.
Everyone's going to be off him. Not everyone. Like you said, he's going to be around 5% owned in GPP. But a lot of people are going to be off him because he only put up 14 fantasy points at Philadelphia. And then they're looking back to that week 3 game against Buffalo where they got routed, right? He had those the 2 fumbles, which makes his stats look worse. He was 40 for 55. He tore up the Rams defense. And Tags, I know you said they're horrible. They've got a lot of talent, though.
They've been bad. Marcus Peters, dude, looks lost.
He does. He's been one of the worst cornerbacks in the NFL, but they've also got a great pass rush. Kirk Cousins struggled last year when he was under pressure. He's not doing that this year. He's a lot better against pressure.
But the thing is, linebackers and corners make up a lot of your coverage, man. And if you can't cover, you're going to have issues. Sue and Donald up front, I mean, that they've been good, but the thing is like they can only do so much.
Tags, you might want to take off your headphones for my next call.
Oh, boy.
But it's a great call. Because Blake Bortles is always a good GPP call.
Stop talking about Blake Bortles.
Blake Bortles is always a good GPP call.
Too much Bortles talk?
Too much Bortles winning. I'm sorry you're sick of it.
You're never on Bortles, are you, Mike?
I know I have been. I don't think this matchup is one to target. I think it's going to be a very low volume game. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. What's the over-under in this game?
It's very low.
It's 40.5.
How many times has Blake Bortles had a 41-point over-under and thrown the ball 61 times?
He's not going to. His defense is going to be able to hold Dallas in check. That's the thing. They're not going to ask him to throw the ball. They know that he'll lose them the game. Like, seriously, this defense, I'm waiting for Jalen Ramsey to go out in the media and be like, Blake Bortles sucks. Like, what are we going to do at quarterback? Because this can't keep happening. I think that's going to happen at some point. But the thing is Jacksonville needs a win on the road. They can beat Dallas with their defense, and I expect them to do that. I expect them to run, to use the screen game, and that's the way I see them winning this game. I think it's going to be a very low volume game. Very, very, very low.
Meanwhile, he's still the number 1 fantasy football quarterback over the last 11 weeks. He sucks, but he gets it done in fantasy, so I don't care. I'm getting exposure.
I'm worried about, when does he really struggle? It's normally when he's under a lot of pressure, right? That's when kind of that bad decision's coming. And I think that Dallas is going to get a ton of pressure. So I think that's more or less the main reason I'm off Bortles this week. And the other reason is I'm not really sure who to pair him with in tournaments. Like the DD Cole Moncrief thing just like really messes with my head, basically. You could pair him with Yeldon. That probably makes the most sense. Just try and capture all of the upside there. I just think there's going to be a lot of pressure from the Cowboys, even at that price. I've actually played Bortles a decent amount this year, but I think this is a week I probably won't have any.
Anyone else you want to go back to, Tags? Can we go Mitch Trubisky?
No, absolutely not.
I don't think so either.
No, don't blame Mitch either. The quarterback's a very small pool for me this week.
What about Alex Smith?
No, stop it.
He was horrible.
I'm not going to talk about Alex Smith.
Why stop it? Why? Well, what?
No, because I'm going to get a lot of hate.
Alex Smith was a top 5 fantasy quarterback last year, and he runs the ball.
I'm going to get so much hate because, like, that's the thing is Alex Smith's, like, he had a terrible game. Like, he had a very terrible...
Yeah, he had one bad game, so no one's going to play him. You think Alex Smith is suddenly a horrible quarterback?
But here's the fact of the matter, dude. Paul Richardson probably not going to play. Josh Doxson probably not going to play. He's also bad at football. Chris Thompson probably not going to play. Adrian Peterson's dinged up. Like, who the hell is he going to throw to? He targeted Jordan Reed 2 times last week. What is happening? Like, that's the thing is, like, there's so many problems I have with this team right now. I want no part of it. Like, seriously, like, I said it when Alex Smith went there. The only concern I had with Alex Smith was that his pass catchers didn't match his skill set. Like, Paul Richardson and Josh Doxson are not wide receivers that Alex Smith is going to throw to with much confidence. I'm staying away from it right now.
Okay.
He's not a bad quarterback, but he's in a very, very bad spot.
All right, Joe, any other quarterbacks you want to mention?
Yeah, one name I'll throw out there. I haven't played him at all this year, but looking at the leverage score stuff, Russell Wilson at 5,700. But hear me out. So the Seattle offensive line, terrible, right? Like, they've been one of the worst pass blocking units in the entire league, but this Oakland defense is near the bottom for pressure. So that, I mean, when I'm looking at like the slate from a broad perspective, I really want to look and see which quarterbacks are going to see pressure and which ones aren't, and then kind of move out from there. I think that given his price, I mentioned that I do like Doug Baldwin in tournaments. Like, after everyone was kind of on Wilson as like a cheap punt play last week, like, I wouldn't be surprised if on the road where no one's on him, this game that I just don't think he's going to see as much pressure. Maybe his hamstring's getting a little bit healthier. They start to use his legs a little bit more. Like, Russell Wilson at 5,700, when we're considering some of these other guys, like, I think he's a way better play than Bortles at 56.
If his hamstring is really hurt that bad, why is he running 40 yards downfield to block somebody? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand what's going on with Russell Wilson. Last 3 games, 26 attempts for under 200 yards, 26 for under 200, 21 for under 200. He ran the ball 0 times last week. I used to play him every single week in GPP. I don't know if even against Oakland, I don't know if I want that much exposure. I think he's a fine play, but man, he's just been so disappointing. I don't know what's going on. Guys, let's go with our locks of the week. Tags, why don't you go first?
Julio, I'm standing by this call this week. I am not even wavering in at all. Like, last week I wavered because I debated him. I am not wavering at all. Julio Jones must play this week.
All right, Joe, who you going with?
Yeah, this is my wheelhouse where I get to pick a chalk play, right? So I'll go Cameron Brate at 3,700 in this game. I just think that the touchdown upside at 3,700 for a guy Winston has proven that he likes to lock on to in the red zone in this massive total game in a week that we need a lot of salary. Cameron Brate for me.
Cameron Brate's my lock as well. All right, that's all for today's show. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
And thanks to the sponsors of today's show, pristineauction.com. That's PRISTINE, where they've got over hundreds of lots that end every single day. Make sure to check out what they have for your cave, and make sure to sign up for our contest giveaway at fantasybros.com/contest. Thanks also to FanDuel.com. Make sure to check out their World Fantasy Football Championship qualifier that they have going on. $8 entry fee, 1 in 7,200 chance to get to that live final. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.